The statue of Lady Justice in the middle of the dazzling marble hall stood like a reminder of balance and equality. But exactly at 2:47 p.m., that balance tilted. A black woman was surrounded by security guards under countless cameras going live. No one knew that in just a few minutes, this entire building would bow to the very person they had just dismissed. Dr. Sienna Park stepped through the cascade of light reflected from crystal chandeliers onto Carrara stone floors. Her navy blazer framed her shoulders like a silent declaration. 45 years old, her face calm with the poise of someone who had negotiated deals with more zeros than her years of age. Her steps soft as silk, yet every footfall carried weight. The automatic doors closed behind her, and the Metropolitan Trust lobby became a stage just unveiled. Eyes turned, whispers rose, then fell silent as she passed. Ethan Blake looked up from behind the glossy ebony desk. 29. His wine-colored tie knotted too tightly, his gaze trying to project a wall of authority, though behind it was still a boy fresh from school. He took her in quickly and shallowly, her height of 5'5", brown skin, the understated elegance, with no flash. A snap judgment flickered through him like default code. Problem customer, no appointment, doesn't belong. His voice rang out, loud enough to echo off the vaulted ceiling. "Ma'am, this is a private institution. You cannot just barge in here and make demands." The word barge hit the stone floor and shattered into stares. A moment of silence, then whispers. A young woman at the ATM lifted her phone. A middle-aged man froze his pen over a check, and at the far corner, Kayla Rivera, host of Justice Watch, tapped Go Live almost by instinct. Sienna placed her leather bag on the desk edge, the thud of leather on wood, low and deep like a note struck. "I came for a routine transaction," she said evenly, her voice pouring out smoothly. A faint smile crossed Ethan's lips, not warm, only eager to teach someone. "Routine transaction?" He raised an eyebrow, sliding his chair back to add height. "Then surely you must have an account significant enough to merit our attention?" Javier Cruz, 41, his security uniform wrapped over a solid frame, took half a step closer and stopped at the edge of the ornate Persian rug. He had seen many disputes, anger over fees, tears over overdrafts. But in this woman, he saw something else entirely, unmoving, still like water before a storm. Sienna opened her wallet. Her movements were slow, precise, like folding an old letter. A glint of metal flashed briefly under the lights, just enough for Javier to see, not enough for Ethan to notice. Kayla lifted her phone higher, whispering to the flood of viewers joining the chat. "See this?" The manager is sinking fast. The view count surged like a tide. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to leave." Ethan raised his voice, his eyes sweeping the crowd to confirm the stage was still his. "Or I'll call the police. People like you need to understand their place. The words people like you split the air in two." A few brows furrowed. Javier shifted, a nerve in his neck twitching. Olivia Tran, 31, assistant manager, emerged from the back office, her hair neatly tied, her eyes quick like someone used to reading fine print in long reports. She paused for a moment. The bag wasn't a fake. The stitching, the leather, the handle, all whispered class. But Ethan was her superior, and her job was to stand with him. "Is there an issue here?" Olivia asked, her tone carefully neutral. "This woman claims she has business here," Ethan replied, smoothing his tie. "No appointment, no documents, demanding special treatment." Kayla shifted closer, capturing Sienna's expression, her dark eyes deep like a night sky, hidden behind a strip of fading light. Near the door, blogger Devin Brooks, 34, with 40,000 followers, lifted his camera. "Live at Metropolitan Trust. Everyone needs to see this." "I have not asked for special treatment," Sienna replied, her voice so steady it made others realize someone else was far too loud. "Nor have I raised my voice." Ethan smirked, turning to the crowd as if seeking allies. "You see? That's the so-called special demand no one can verify." "You could have asked for my documents," Sienna continued gently, like reminding someone of a figure in a balance sheet. Ethan snapped, "You talk too much." "Security." Javier took a step, then stopped. His professional instincts pulled him forward, but his conscience held him back. This woman was no threat. Only the pride behind the desk was threatening everyone. Light glanced off Sienna's wristwatch, a classic Cartier, as she checked the 12 silver markers like confirming the time for a queue. "I'll give you exactly 2 minutes," she said, almost in a whisper. 2 minutes. Each word dropped to the floor like nails hammered into Ethan's chair. He scoffed. 2 minutes for what? To call security to drag you out? Kayla's chat exploded with messages. "She's counting down. Who is this woman staying so calm? Watch out! Plot twist coming." The view count jumped from 700 to 1,500 in a heartbeat. Devin shifted left to frame the statue of Lady Justice behind Sienna, a picture that spoke louder than words. Olivia's fingers glided across her tablet, searching customer records like a virtuoso. "Name, account number," she offered, trying to cool things down. "That won't be necessary," Sienna answered with a smile that asked no permission. Ethan snapped his jaw, cutting in like a blade. "See? No account, no business, just someone looking for a payout. Just someone." The phrase lingered in the air like smoke. Javier heard his heartbeat slow, the rhythm of a man facing the line between right and wrong. He took half a step back, distancing himself from the mistake about to explode into guilt. Sienna rested her fingertips lightly on the desk, as if pressing a piano key. "One phone call will clear this up." She drew out her phone, its leather case, embossed with the initials S.P. Kayla, zoomed in on the smooth motion, like pouring tea. Ethan snored. "Calling your lawyer?" "Calling the bank's people," she replied, scrolling her contacts. The chandelier's light streaked across the screen before she pressed it to her ear. The line rang once. "James," Sienna said, her voice pitched to carry just far enough. "Activate code 7. Main branch. Immediately." 15 seconds, the call ended. No extra words. The bank lobby, for a moment, was like a lake before a storm, flat, beautiful, and terrifying in its stillness. Olivia shivered, not from cold, but from instinct. Code 7 was no bluff. It was something she had only seen in executive-level documents, underlined in red as urgent. Ethan still smirked, but it had curdled. He snatched the desk phone, calling headquarters security. "I need verification." On Kayla's stream, comments poured like rain. "Look, he's losing ground. She looks like a CEO. This is going viral." Devin panned to the wall clock, 2:55 p.m. Sienna's hand opened and closed, as if counting invisible strings in the air. 90 seconds, she murmured. Javier swallowed hard, his eyes flicking over the phones filming, Ethan's rigid shoulders, Olivia's gaze, no longer a subordinate's but a witness's. "Are you threatening us?" Ethan barked. "I'm saving everyone's time," Sienna replied. She turned slightly, light brushing her cheek like a comma. Kayla leaned closer to her stream, whispering, "If you've ever been dismissed in a place meant to respect you, keep watching. I smell an earthquake." Olivia's tablet pinged, a flashing alert. Urgent Regional VP Daniel Pierce en route. No further escalation. She looked up at Sienna, not because she recognized her name, but because she recognized the shift of power. Ethan slammed the receiver down. Corporate says no VIPs are scheduled today. No special privileges, especially not for someone like you. 59 seconds. The air grew heavy. Sienna looked at her watch, not to count down, but to confirm the symphony in her head was at the right crescendo. "Have you asked for my name?" she said quietly. "No." "Have you asked me for ID?" "No. You rushed to decide I don't belong here." The words "don't belong" pricked Olivia like a needle. She remembered nights when her immigrant mother practiced pronouncing her own name just to stop service clerks from frowning. Javier lowered his eyes, hiding a shame he couldn't name. He had obeyed wrong orders before for a paycheck, but this time was different. 30 seconds, Sienna said, as if announcing curtain rise. Kayla swung her camera toward the glass doors. A figure was running in, tie askew, coat flapping, the gait of someone used to commanding, not apologizing. Devin zoomed, his lens clicking in excitement. Ethan saw the silhouette, and for one brief second, his eyes cracked like paint scraped too soon. He tugged at his tie, stepping back to brace against the desk. Olivia gasped silently. Javier straightened, shoulders squaring, ready to stand on the right side. 10 seconds. Sienna turned, unhurried, not boastful, only like a conductor lowering her hand before the opening note. She didn't need to look to know every lens was locked on her. She lifted her phone, the screen dark now. Her gaze passed Kayla, Devin, Olivia, paused briefly on Javier, then returned to Ethan. "If earlier," she said, her voice low, "you had begun with a question instead of a judgment, perhaps this would be different." She paused, letting the sound of rushing footsteps fill the silence. The glass doors burst open, cool street air swept in. "Dr. Park," a voice called, urgent, raw, laced with fear. The lobby held its breath. Kayla raised her phone higher. Devin held steady. Olivia's eyes widened. Javier exhaled slowly. Sienna's smile was not one of triumph. It was the smile of someone too used to proven she belonged in every room she entered. And with just 5 words she had spoken earlier into the phone, the entire room had unmasked itself. The earthquake had begun. And the scales, this time, were ready to return to balance. The cry "Dr. Park" sliced through the air like a steel blade. The man sprinting into the lobby was Daniel Pierce, regional vice president, 50 years old, his ash-gray suit now wrinkled from the run, his tie skewed by 1/2 centimeter like a scar. No one had ever seen Daniel run. Today he ran. His eyes swept the crowd of raised phones, the statue of Lady Justice, the marble surfaces reflecting the cold light of late afternoon, then locked on Sienna. Daniel's face changed color quickly, relief, shame, and fear. He walked straight to her, his voice lowered to something close to pleading. I apologize for what happened here, Dr. Park." The 2 syllables "apologize" echoed up to the vaulted ceiling and touched the hearts of those watching. Kayla Rivera tightened her grip on her phone, whispering into the mic. "Did you all hear that?" He called her Dr. Park. The viewer count on her screen jittered upward, jumping from 1,500 to 2,000, then 3,000 like water breaching a dam. Devin Brooks held his frame, capturing the moment Daniel bent slightly at the waist, a gesture that did not belong to a man issuing orders, but to someone asking for a chance to make amends. Ethan Blake stood petrified, both hands pressed to the edge of the glossy ebony desk, his knuckles white as if blood might burst through. A hammering pulse rose at his temples, roaring in his ears. "Doctor," he stammered. The word doctor lodged between his throat and a shattering ego. He glanced around for a rope ladder, an excuse, anything to hold on to. There was nothing but hundreds of eyes and cameras recording every blink. Javier Cruz straightened, squaring his shoulders. In that instant, every protective reflex from his past, the kind that made him follow orders first, ask later, dissolved. He took another half-step back, no longer to distance himself from Sienna, but to put space between himself and the mistake now carrying Ethan's name. Olivia Tran felt a tingling at her fingertips. Her body signaled that something major was unfolding. She pulled her tablet closer and logged into the internal admin portal. Search fields lit up like a swarm of fireflies. Name, title, equity, approval rights. She typed Sienna Park, her heart skipping a beat. The line appeared instantly, cold and gleaming like a surgical blade. Sienna Park, founder and CEO, chairwoman, majority shareholder, 67%. Olivia swallowed. A hot, cold rush ran down her spine. All the phrases she had heard at conferences about bias suddenly had a face, a voice, eyes, and a name. Dr. Park, Daniel said, turning to the crowd and then back to her. I take full responsibility for what occurred under my authority. Please allow me to. He did not finish because Ethan lurched forward half a step, his voice hissing through his teeth. I had no idea who you were. If you had introduced yourself at the start, then... Sienna merely raised an eyebrow. One look was enough to cut his sentence in two. If I were someone else, your behavior would be different, she said. Not a question, a diagnosis. Her register was low, full, and calm, and the noise around them receded like a retreating tide. The crowd murmured. Kayla flicked through comments. He is confessing. Plot twist detonated. This is a textbook case of banking, while black. The wall clock slipped from 2:58 to 2:59. Like curtain, down on Act 1. Curtain up on Act 2. We will finish this here, Sienna said, nodding toward the cluster of stainless steel elevators glowing at the end of the hall. In 2 minutes, there is a meeting on the 47th floor. Mr. Pierce, please come. Ms. Tran, you as well. Mr. Blake, you should be present. She turned to Javier. You can remain to coordinate the lobby, keep everyone safe, and help waiting clients complete their transactions without disruption. Javier nodded, his chest lightening. The feeling of being trusted is a beautiful kind of weight. Yes, ma'am, he replied. And for the first time, this shift, his voice, was not that of a man waiting for orders, but of someone invited to do what is right. Wait, Ethan blurted, grasping at his slipping authority. I need to verify again with headquarters security that... You have verified? Daniel cut in, his voice low and crisp like a seal pressed into heavy paper. And you were wrong. They are watching the live stream like everyone else here. No further verification is needed. He turned to Sienna, chest heaving from the run, his eyes carrying a promise to make things right. Dr. Park, the elevators are ready. Sienna did not answer immediately. She looked around the lobby, the brown leather chairs, the signs that read, Respect every customer, the stone columns with veins like giant arteries. Then she looked at Kayla and Devin. You did the right thing, she said. Light always helps a room stay clean. Kayla flinched gently at the words, a recognition both warm and firm, like a hand on the shoulder nudging forward. Somewhere inside her, a thought sparked. Maybe we are not just filming a scandal. Maybe we are recording a milestone. The group moved toward the elevators. The crowd unconsciously parted into 2 lines, as if making way for a procession. Shoes clicked on marble, sharp, clear, measured. Each click laid down another punctuation mark in a sentence not yet finished. Olivia walked a half step behind, clutching her tablet. Data on Sienna scrolled through her mind like a fast wound reel. Fundraising history, mergers, a minority enterprise support fund, speeches about respect as a system, not a slogan. Each data point was a nail, and she hammered herself into a new reality. I just stood beside a major mistake. I will repay it by standing beside change. At the elevators, the steel doors opened. Shadows poured onto the brushed metal floor like liquid ink. Sienna stepped in first. Daniel followed. Ethan hesitated for half a second. Only half, enough for every camera to capture it, then stepped in like a man turning himself in. Olivia entered last. The door shut, slicing the lobby from the cab with a thin silver line. Inside the closed space, sound shifted. The soft whir of cables, human breaths, a heart pounding fast and heavy. The numbers on the panel jumped from 1 to 2, 3, 4, like a ruler measuring status. Each floor higher, peeling away another mask. "Mr. Blake," Sienna said, her eyes sharp without a sword, "I will ask you one question, and I expect one honest answer." Ethan nodded on reflex, his throat parched. "If I had said my name the moment I walked in, if you had known who I was, would your treatment have been different?" Silence in the cab thickened like syrup. Daniel watched the numbers climb, but in truth he was staring into a mirror called conscience. Olivia suddenly remembered her mother's smile the day she first opened an account at a small bank, the way the teller pronounced her mother's name correctly without a laugh. That feeling, being called by the right name, was small back then, but warm like a hearth. "Yes," Ethan said softly, "just one word." And the cab sank a fraction. The admission, raw and bitter, exposed the tumor sleeping in the organization's body, judging people by who they are in status, instead of respecting them because they are human. "Thank you for the truth," Sienna replied. Gratitude not for an apology, but for a clear diagnosis, the minimum condition to begin treatment. The numbers blinked. 24, 25, 26. "Dr. Park," Daniel said, his voice carrying a humility rare in an executive. "What just happened does not reflect our organization's values. I accept responsibility for failed oversight." You will accept responsibility by leading the change," Sienna cut in, neither hard nor soft. "This afternoon we may lose a day of PR. If we do this right tonight, tomorrow we will gain a decade of trust." Daniel drew a deep breath. "Yes." 30 lit up. Olivia lifted her head, a new belief fragile as spun glass yet beginning to take shape. "Perhaps I can make something decent from here." Ethan opened his mouth again, clinging to one last stake. If at the start you had presented an ID card or said a simple, "I am," none of this would have happened. Sienna's eyes cooled to the temperature of steel. "You just stated the reason this thing had to happen," she answered, the words dropping like a stone into a deep well. "Respect does not require a password. Dignity does not wait for a business card." The cab shivered at floor 37, then 38. All four stared forward, each following a separate thread of thought, Sienna assembling a reform frame, Daniel drafting in his head a list of apologies and actions, Olivia sketching a line between silence and courage, Ethan confronted by a version of himself so small it was unbearable. Floor 45. The cable hummed a long note like a bow drawn across strings. Sienna turned to Olivia, her voice gentling. "Do you think you could have acted differently when you stepped into the lobby?" Olivia nodded, eyes hot but dry. Yes. I should have asked before I assumed. Good, Sienna said. Tomorrow starts with a question. Keep doing that. Floor 46. The air in the cab thinned like paper. Words no longer needed to be loud, because truth was loud enough. Floor 47. The doors opened. Executive floor light swept in like a silver mist, the scent of polished wood and Italian leather drifting softly. Ahead lay a deep blue carpeted corridor, leading to a glass conference room, 12 chairs waiting, quarterly charts laid out, powerful faces unaware of the storm that had just detonated below. Let's go, Sienna said, stepping out first. Her stride was not fast, but each step tugged along the gravity of a simple principle: everyone deserves respect before any title. Left behind, Ethan stared at the elevator steel reflecting his face, warped, washed out, and true. He inhaled deeply and followed, because sometimes the only way forward is straight through the truth you hate most. Outside the conference room, Daniel straightened his tie and murmured, "I will open the door." "No," Sienna shook her head with a brief smile. "We will open it." He nodded, placing his hand over the handle. For a split second, Olivia saw the reflection of all four of them on the glass. An accidental group portrait, past, present, mistakes, and opportunity. The door began to part, the hinge singing a faint note. The earthquake rose to the 47th floor, and on the other side, the scales were about to be set right, not by a slogan, but by evidence, accountability, and a plan sharp enough to cut bias at the root. The conference room door on the 47th floor opened, and the cool air from the ventilation system, mixed with the scent of polished wood and Italian leather, rushed straight into the elevator cab. Inside, the 12 most powerful people at Metropolitan Trust Bank were seated around a wooden table gleaming like a lake surface. On the table lay quarterly reports, growth charts, share diagrams, all being discussed in the familiar cadence of metrics, profits, projections. But when the doors swung open, every eye lifted from the paperwork. They looked toward the entrance as if something extraordinary had just barged into the daily rhythm. And it had. Dr. Sienna Park stepped in, followed by Daniel Pierce, Ethan Blake, and Olivia Tran. Honorary chairman of the board, Harold Whitman, 72, shot to his feet. He had once been the mentor who guided Sienna through her early Wall Street years. His silvered eyes flashed with concern, laced with confusion. "Sienna, what is happening? Daniel, why do you look a wreck?" Daniel swallowed hard, trying to regain composure, though sweat still beaded at his temples. "We have an emergency. Code 7. A ripple of shock coursed around the room. Code 7, a phrase used only when the bank faced a legal crisis or a serious risk that could impact the entire system. All reports were pushed aside. Everyone turned to Sienna. She did not sit. Her steps were unhurried, the sound of her heels on the deep blue carpet like a drum roll. She set her leather case on the table and opened it with calm precision. A tablet glowed to life, her fingers moved in a few deft gestures. Then a feed appeared on the large screen at the far end of the room. Not a profit report, not a stock chart. It was a live stream. The audio hit first. Ethan's voice rang through the room. "People like you need to understand your place. Nunganguoinhu bafai bitvitriqua min." In that luxurious room, the sentence detonated like a grenade. A few board members' eyes went wide. Others who tried to keep their composure gripped their chair arms. Dr. Lorraine Adams, 58, the only black woman on the board, planted a hand on the table, her eyes sharp as a blade. What did he just say? Sienna did not need to answer. The video rolled on. the image of Ethan at the counter, his arrogant tone, chest thrust forward, while Sienna, smaller in stature, never let her gaze waver. Kayla Rivera's phone lens trembled slightly with the heartbeat of the person filming, but the audio was crisp, contempt, humiliation, and arrogance laid bare. Harold Whitman brought a hand to his mouth. David Lynn, 63, strategy expert, hissed under his breath, "My God!" The room fell into a silence, strangled by shame and dread. When the clip reached the moment Daniel Pierce appeared, breathless, calling Dr. Park, the entire board swung their gaze to Ethan. He had gone ashen, sweat shining on his brow, his lips working as if a defense might appear. No words came. Sienna paused the video at the precise frame where Ethan's panic was unmistakable. The frozen image hung like an indictment in mid-air. She turned to the board, her voice low, no need to shout. This is what took place in the main branch lobby 40 minutes ago. More than 200 customers witnessed it in person. Over 50,000 have watched the live stream. The number is still climbing. Her fingertip tapped, shifting to a data analysis slide, social graphs spiking, the hashtag banking while black surging to the top of trends. Local news tickers had already switched to breaking news. This is no longer a routine customer incident, Sienna continued, her tone steady but every word landing heavy. This is a crisis of trust, a public proof that bias still lives inside this organization, and worse, it happened under the roof I built. Ethan tried to stammer. I did not know. If you had the chance to ask my name. You did not. You had the chance to request identification. You did not. You chose bias. Sienna's voice struck like a gavel. The board was stone still. Lorraine Adams slowly turned to Ethan. You just admitted that the difference in treatment came from your belief that she did not belong here. And that belief was based on what? Mr. Blake, Ethan mumbled, his eyes fixed on the carpet. The answer was so obvious that his silence became a confession. Sienna tapped to the next slide. This is the rule I wrote when I founded Metropolitan Trust, Policy 847. Zero tolerance for any discriminatory conduct. The lines of text appeared, cold, bright, like a judgment carved in stone. Today, one of our managers trampled it in front of thousands of witnesses. I will not allow this to be buried by a quiet settlement or a LinkedIn apology. We will confront it, and we will reform. Harold inhaled deeply, then exhaled as if conceding. Sienna, what do you want from the board? She looked at each face, her eyes luminous yet unyielding. I want the truth acknowledged. I want responsibility assigned. And I want changes deep enough to keep this from ever happening again. Starting with this, she turned to Ethan. You will resign today, or be terminated for cause, with no benefits, no severance. The wall clock ticked, each second a countdown. Ethan's shoulders collapsed, his eyes went vacant. He knew a short career had just been buried here. Sienna did not spare him another second. She faced the board again, back straight, her words ringing like a bell. We cannot cover this up, but we can turn it into an opportunity for Metropolitan Trust to lead the industry, not only in profit, but in fairness. Light spilled through the window and washed across her face, and in that instant, even the board members who once doubted her had to admit, standing before them was not just a CEO, but the person resetting the standards for an entire banking industry. The atmosphere in the boardroom thickened like stone. The frozen image of Ethan Blake still filled the large screen, his face twisted between arrogance and fear, a living testimony of what had just unfolded downstairs. Everyone understood. There was no way back. Dr. Sienna Park folded her arms across her chest, her gaze fixed on Ethan. Her voice was low and steady, but each word struck like a hammer on marble. You said you didn't know who I was. If I weren't the founder of this bank, would you have treated me differently? The answer is clear. The problem isn't me. It is anyone you believe doesn't belong here. Ethan trembled, his hand clutching the edge of his chair. Sweat streamed down into the collar of his crumpled shirt. I admit I was wrong, he stammered. But I didn't intend to discriminate. You just assumed, Sienna cut in, her eyes sharp as a blade. You assumed I lacked standing. You assumed I was not worthy of the same service as any other customer, and those assumptions became discrimination. Do you dare deny it? Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came. The room sank into silence so deep that even the ticking of the clock became an accusation. Dr. Lorraine Adams leaned forward, her voice crisp and deliberate. Mr. Blake, answer directly. You acted based on appearance and your own prejudice. Is that correct? Ethan lowered his eyes. His throat tightened. After long, dragging seconds, he gave the faintest nod. Yes. A collective intake of breath swept the table. A few members could not hide their anger. David Lynn dropped his pen to the table, the sharp crack cutting the air. You just ended your career with your own hands. Sienna did not waver. She turned her tablet to the next slide, displaying Policy 847 that she herself had written when founding Metropolitan Trust. The words appeared on the screen like inscriptions carved in stone. Metropolitan Trust Bank has zero tolerance for any act of discrimination based on race, gender, religion, or background. Violations will result in immediate termination. She looked Ethan squarely in the eye. This policy is not decoration. It is the backbone of this bank, and you broke it in front of thousands of witnesses. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice trembling. Please give me another chance. I am willing to apologize publicly. I will. Sienna raised her hand, cutting him off. The chance is no longer yours. It belongs to this bank. And this bank must prove that principle is more than words on paper. Harold Whitman, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice rough but firm. I agree. The board must decide here and now. Sienna nodded. Mr. Blake has two options. 1, resign immediately and receive only the basic severance stipulated. 2, be terminated for cause, losing all benefits. The board's eyes fixed on Ethan. His gaze drifted, then settled on his trembling hands, resting on his lap. After a pause that stretched like a lifetime, he bowed his head. I will resign. A few board members exhaled softly in relief, but Sienna did not allow the tension to dissolve. She turned to Olivia Tran. And you? You stood by Mr. Blake as the incident escalated. But you were also the first to check the data, to find proof confirming my identity. You can learn from this mistake. Olivia clutched her tablet, her voice breaking. Dr. Park, I am sorry. I did not have the courage to ask questions instead of standing on the wrong side. I am willing to accept any disciplinary action. Sienna stepped closer, her tone lowered, not cold, but instructive. You will not be dismissed, but you will undergo a 6-month probation with training on bias awareness. If you succeed, you will prove you are not another Blake, that you know how to correct mistakes. Olivia bowed her head, her eyes brimming. Within her, a spark of hope flickered through the shame. Daniel Pierce, standing nearby, exhaled softly. He understood. They had just been pulled back from a disaster that could have been buried. Sienna was not only punishing, she was reshaping how the bank confronted its failures. Sienna turned back to face the board. Disciplining individuals is only the first step. The next part is more important. We must reform the system. If not, today it is Blake. Tomorrow there will be another Blake. Her gaze swept across each face, pausing on Harold, Lorraine, Daniel. I will not allow that. In that moment, no one saw Sienna as merely a customer mistreated in a lobby. Before them stood the founder, the chairwoman, and the very future of Metropolitan Trust. Light from the 47th floor windows spilled across the boardroom table, casting its glow onto the tense faces of each board member. The air was heavy, like the stillness before a storm. But this time, Dr. Sienna Park had not come merely to expose one violator. She had come to change the entire system. She turned her tablet, opening a new slide. Bold letters appeared on the room's main screen, the Sienna Protocol resetting the standard of fairness in banking. The room stirred. Some leaned back in their chairs, others leaned forward as if to study every word. Sienna's voice rang out, calm but commanding. We cannot stop at punishing an individual and call it justice. Because the root of the problem is not one employee, it is the structure itself. If left untouched, another Ethan Blake will appear, and next time, this bank may not have the chance to recover. The next slide appeared. 3 pillars of reform. 1. Bias recognition and training. Every employee in customer-facing roles, from tellers to branch managers to executives, must undergo a mandatory 6-month program. It is not slogans, but real case studies, psychological analysis, and practice in correct responses. At the end, periodic testing will be required. Those who fail will not continue to serve customers. 2. Customer interaction monitoring. Every branch will be equipped with technology to analyze speech and tone in real time. The system will detect patterns of bias, interruptions, changes in tone based on accent, appearance, or name. If flagged, management receives immediate alerts. 3. Public audits and reporting. Each branch must submit monthly diversity and fairness reports, including number of complaints, handling of incidents, and customer survey results. Reports will be shared not only internally, but partially with the public. Transparency is not a burden. It is the shield that protects our credibility. The room fell into silence as each bullet appeared. Faces long trained to mask emotion now revealed a mix of worry, astonishment, and even admiration. David Lynn, strategy expert, frowned. Are you trying to turn this entire bank into a sociology lab? The cost will be massive. Sienna rotated her screen, showing figures. Initial implementation cost, $4.7 million. Annual operating cost, $2.1 million. Current quarterly revenue, $847 million. Her voice cut firmly. Total cost is less than 1% of revenue. But the ROI is different. Customer retention will rise at least 12%. New client acquisition, especially among minority-owned enterprises, will increase 18%. Projected additional revenue, $62 million annually. Call this not only fairness, but business advantage. Several members nodded, jotting notes quickly. The numbers reassured them. This reform was not only ethics, it was economics. Lorraine Adams placed both hands on the table, her eyes lit with resolve. I agree. This is an opportunity for Metropolitan Trust to lead the entire industry. Harold Whitman nodded slowly, his voice raspy but clear. That's right. More than half my life, I have seen incidents of discrimination buried in silence. For the first time, I see a plan to turn crisis into strength. Yet dissent remained. Sarah Kim, communications director, raised her hand. Publishing reports could expose us to scrutiny, even allow competitors to attack us. Sienna turned to her, gaze steady. We will be scrutinized whether we publish or not. The difference is, when we publish, we control the narrative. When we hide, we surrender it to the media. The choice is ours. Sarah fell silent. Her argument dissolved on her lips. Ethan Blake slumped in his chair, a shadow already forgotten. No one looked at him anymore. Every eye was on Sienna, the one who had just laid the foundation for a turning point. Sienna concluded, her voice strong. This is not just reform. This will be legacy. Tomorrow, the press will ask, what did Metropolitan Trust do after the scandal? And our answer must be, we became the most equitable bank in America. The room held its breath, then erupted in agreement. Firm nods, pens racing across paper. The vote came swiftly, nearly unanimous. In that moment, not only the fate of one employee was sealed, but the compass of an entire institution had been reset. And from the 47th floor, looking down at the city below, Sienna knew the wave of change had begun, and it would not stop here. The air in the boardroom after the vote settled into silence, but tension still hung like a blade above their heads. Every board member turned their eyes to Dr. Sienna Park. They had just approved a bold reform, yet all knew the larger battle had not begun. Outside, social media was exploding. The press had already smelled blood. Sienna pressed a button, and the large screen shifted to a detailed analysis. Red numbers appeared like open wounds, risk of class action, lawsuit for discrimination, estimated damages of $12 million, plus legal costs. Risk of investigation by the Federal Reserve and the Department of Justice, potential fines, and expanded system-wide audits. Brand loss. Similar incidents had caused competitors to lose 15 to 20% of their customers within 12 months. The room grew heavy. Sarah Kim, head of communications, turned pale, her hand trembling as she flipped her notes. If this story continues to spread, she whispered, this isn't just a communications crisis, it's an existential one. Sienna did not flinch. She advanced to the next slide, and green numbers filled the screen. If the comprehensive reform, the Sienna Protocol, was implemented, projected legal damages dropped to under $2 million. Implementation cost $4.7 million initially, $2.1 million annually. Projected ROI, an additional $62 million a year from customer growth and retention. Competitive edge, positioning Metropolitan Trust as the pioneer bank for equity and diversity. We have two paths, Sienna said, her voice steady as a heartbeat. One, continue with the old model, accept lawsuits, brand erosion, and watch competitors steal our clients. Two, turn this crisis into an advantage, into an opportunity to rise as the leading bank in fairness. A pause of silence. Then came the sound of a pen tapping the table. Harold Whitman. He nodded, his silvered eyes flashing with agreement. As always, you have calculated 3 steps ahead of everyone. Daniel Pierce interjected, I can ensure the regional division will monitor implementation closely. No branch will be allowed to stray. His tone was urgent, almost like a plea for redemption. Sienna scanned the room, her gaze landing on Sarah Kim, still anxious. The media is not our enemy. If we stay silent, the story will be defined by people splicing clips out there. But if we go proactive, we control the message. Sarah lifted her head. Proactive? You mean Sienna switched to a new slide? The logo of Metropolitan Trust over a green background, beneath it in white letters. Fairness is not a privilege. It is a commitment. Tomorrow we hold a nationwide press conference. I will publicly acknowledge the incident. No deflection, no excuses. We take responsibility and at the same time announce the Siena Protocol as the solution. No defense, no spin, only absolute transparency. The room froze. That was not how banks usually handled crises. Normally, they stayed silent, settled quietly, bought time. But Siena was putting the bank in the storm's center, turning the storm into a spotlight. Lorraine Adams smiled and nodded. Yes, public, transparent. It is the only way to turn a mistake into legacy. David Lynn bit his lip, then exhaled. High risk. But if it succeeds, Metropolitan Trust will be hailed as the model. Siena closed her file, her voice sealing the moment. We are not afraid of risk. We are afraid of losing the soul of this bank. I founded Metropolitan Trust with a promise that anyone who walked in would be served equally. Today that promise was betrayed. Tomorrow we will rewrite it in front of the nation. The late afternoon light stretched across the deep blue carpet. The room sat motionless. Then, one by one, heads began to nod. No more dissent. No more doubt. Tomorrow, Metropolitan Trust would face the cameras. And instead of trembling, they were ready to step onto the stage with a message that could not be twisted. Fairness is the compass. At dawn the next day, as the first light touched the glass facade of Metropolitan Trust's headquarters, a row of satellite trucks lined the street outside. Antennas rose like spears, cameras stood in formation, reporters pressed shoulder to shoulder. The atmosphere was as heavy as the moments before a historic trial. On Twitter, the hashtag #BankingWhileBlack shot straight into the national top 3. Instagram was flooded with screenshots of Ethan Blake's panicked face, side by side with Dr. Siena Park's composed stance. Memes spread like wildfire. He thought he was the boss, not knowing she was the chairwoman. 9 o'clock. The 12th floor auditorium of headquarters had been transformed into a press room. At the front, a navy backdrop bore the bank's logo and the freshly unveiled motto, "The Siena Protocol Fairness is not a privilege. It is a commitment." Over 30 reporters from CNN, Bloomberg, the New York Times, and community media outlets filled the room. Cameras clicked non-stop. The anticipation was electric, as if everyone knew this moment would write a new chapter in banking history. When the doors opened, Siena Park walked out, followed by Harold Whitman, Lorraine Adams, and Daniel Pierce. She was no longer in the navy blazer from yesterday. Instead, she wore a crisp white suit. White, a declaration, transparent, clean, with nothing to hide. Flashes erupted in bursts. Reporters shouted questions over one another. "Dr. Park, can you confirm the incident of discrimination at the Central Branch? Is Ethan Blake just a scapegoat, or is this a systemic issue? How will the bank compensate the customers who were harmed?" Siena raised her hand, her palm open, signaling for silence. The noise ebbed. Her voice came steady, low and clear. Yes, the incident yesterday was real. I, the founder and chairwoman, was dismissed by my own employee inside the very building I created. Not because I lacked an appointment, not because I caused disruption, but simply because I did not look like someone they believed belonged here. A ripple spread through the press hall. Pens scratched furiously across notepads. But this is not only my story. This is the story of thousands of customers out there, people treated poorly because of prejudice. And today, I declare, it ends at Metropolitan Trust. Behind her, the screen lit up with the logo of the Siena Protocol. She continued, her voice now sharpened, each phrase a hammer striking the air. We will implement mandatory training on unconscious bias. We will monitor every customer interaction with technology. We will publish monthly reports for all to see what we are doing. We will lead, not only in profit, but in fairness. Microphones trembled as they caught her words. A CNN reporter raised a hand. "Dr. Park, are you not afraid that going public will make the bank a bigger target?" Sienna lifted her chin. "I fear silence more. Silence means letting prejudice survive. Transparency means placing it under light, and light always wins." A lone clap sounded from the back of the room. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the hall erupted in applause, a rare moment for a corporate press conference. Not because of promises of profit, but because of a moral declaration. Online, clips of her speech cascaded through feeds. Kayla Rivera posted a video cut of the line, "Light always wins," and within 2 hours it had reached 2.3 million views. New hashtags appeared: Sienna Protocol, Equal Banking, Respect for All. Meanwhile, Ethan Blake sat in silence in his rented suburban apartment, hastily posting a LinkedIn statement. "I regret the misunderstanding. I was only following procedure." Instead of sympathy, his post was ridiculed, screenshotted, and mocked. Procedure prejudice? Metropolitan Trust, on the other hand, saw its stock price tick upward in the morning session, a rare sign for a company in the eye of a media storm. Financial analysts commented, "The market is betting on Sienna Park's leadership. If she delivers on her promises, this bank could become a new model." The press conference ended. As Sienna stepped out of the hall, she caught the eyes of a young intern standing among the staff. The girl's eyes glowed with admiration. A fleeting moment, but one that reminded Sienna this battle was not only for balance sheets, but for the faith of generations to come. That day, public opinion split. Some doubted, others cheered. But all agreed on one point: Metropolitan Trust was no longer the same bank as yesterday, and Sienna Park was no longer just a CEO. She had become the symbol of a revolution in finance. 6 weeks after the explosive press conference, the atmosphere inside Metropolitan Trust's central branch had changed beyond recognition. The gleaming marble still reflected the chandelier light as before, but the energy of the place was now entirely different. Warm, professional, and filled with respect. The desk once belonging to Ethan Blake now had a new owner, Nora Delgado, 43, a Latina woman with 15 years of experience running suburban branches. Her hair was tied neatly, her smile welcoming, but her eyes sharp. In just a few weeks, she had created a completely new workplace culture. Her motto, posted clearly on the staff bulletin board, read, "Every customer deserves the best service, no exceptions." On the walls, new posters hung straight: "Respect for all ton, trong cho moa ngoe." Beside them, a digital screen displayed the bank's anti-discrimination policy in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Customers came not only to transact, but to witness a new definition of fairness. Olivia Tran, who once hesitated on that fateful day, was now assistant branch manager. 6 weeks of intensive training in bias recognition had reshaped the way she saw the world. This morning she walked to Nora's desk, tablet in hand. "Ma'am, this month's report." Nora opened the file, her eyes brightened at the figures. Customer satisfaction up 18%, complaints down 63%, staff confidence in handling sensitive situations up 41%. "Excellent," Nora said firmly. "Keep it going. This is only the beginning." Just then, Olivia's tablet vibrated, An alert from the newly installed real-time bias detection system appeared. Potential communication risk at counter 4. Olivia moved quickly. A young teller was asking an elderly Asian customer to speak more clearly, even though his speech was perfectly understandable. Olivia observed, then gently intervened, explaining to the teller, "The issue isn't the customer's voice. It's your focus. You weren't truly listening." After a few minutes of on-the-spot coaching, the transaction was completed smoothly, and the customer left smiling. This was exactly what the Siena Protocol was designed to do: transform potential friction into moments of learning, stopping crises before they could be born. Meanwhile, Javier Cruz, the former security guard who had witnessed the entire incident, was now an internal security trainer for the system. In a staff training session, he shared, "I have seen discrimination happen many times. But this time, thanks to Dr. Park, we have tools to stop it, instead of standing by." The media quickly picked up the story. Kyla Rivera, who had live-streamed the fateful day, was now a regular collaborator in videos documenting the bank's transformation. Her clip 6 weeks later, "How a Bank Transformed," gained over 3 million views in just 3 days. In the video, she stood in the branch lobby smiling. Today, you don't see a place filled with tension anymore. You see an environment where everyone is welcomed. On Forbes, Devin Brooks published a widely shared article, "Metropolitan Trust from Discrimination Crisis to Industry Pioneer." The article emphasized that transparency and decisive action had not destroyed the bank, but strengthened it. The market results were undeniable. Metropolitan Trust's stock had risen 12% in 6 weeks. New accounts opened increased 31%, especially among minority communities. Small businesses began transferring their accounts from competitors to Metropolitan, trusting a fairer environment. In an internal meeting, Daniel Pierce reported to the board, "These changes didn't just save the bank from crisis. They turned fairness into a competitive advantage. Competitors are starting to copy our model." On the 47th floor, Siena Park read the report, a faint smile touching her lips. But in her eyes was no complacency, only the awareness of someone who knew the journey was just beginning. 6 weeks of success was not enough to uproot a system of bias built over decades. She stood at the glass, looking down at the city below. The traffic still roared, the streets still moved. But she knew something had truly shifted, not just in the bank, but in how society looked at one word: fairness. A year had passed since that fateful afternoon, and Metropolitan Trust Bank was now almost unrecognizable compared to the institution it once was. The headquarters still stood tall in the heart of the city, but instead of symbolizing distance and cold authority, it had become a beacon of trust and transformation. In the marble hall that once witnessed humiliation, laughter, and conversation, now filled the air during a celebration of diversity. Balloons and banners hung above as customers and employees gathered together. Branch Director Nora Delgado, 43, took the podium, her voice strong. Over the past 12 months, the Central Branch has achieved the highest customer satisfaction scores in the bank's history. Complaints of discrimination, 0. Minority-owned business accounts, up 34%. These are not just numbers. They are proof that change has taken root. Applause thundered through the hall. In the crowd, Olivia Tron stood among her colleagues, her eyes shining. Once labeled a silent bystander, she was now Regional Director of Diversity, overseeing training for 1,200 employees across the system. To the right of the hall, Javier Cruz, The former security guard, now head of security training, spoke to a group of new hires. That day I hesitated. I stood on the line between right and wrong, and I learned that silence can also be a crime. That is why today I teach you, courage to intervene is protection. On stage, the LED screen displayed impressive statistics. Metropolitan Trust's stock had risen 28% in 1 year. Revenue from minority-owned businesses had tripled. The bank had just received the National Diversity Award from the American Bankers Association. Beyond its walls, the wave had spread through the industry. 17 other banks, large and small, had officially adopted the Siena Protocol as a model. A federal report confirmed discussions of making the framework mandatory for all banks with assets over $1 billion. In academia, business schools had turned the Metropolitan Trust case into required study. MBA students analyzed every step, from the confrontation in the lobby to the decision to go public to the rollout of reforms. The name Siena Park became proof of how a CEO could turn personal crisis into an industry legacy. For the community, the impact was even deeper. The $5 million minority business fund Siena had announced at the first press conference had now revolved more than $40 million in capital. Dozens of startups had launched, creating thousands of jobs in neighborhoods once neglected. Unemployment in some areas had visibly dropped. On social media, Kayla Rivera continued to document the journey. She filmed a vlog at the celebration, her voice full of emotion. 1 year ago, right here, I live-streamed a scene of humiliation. Today, I return to find a symbol of trust. This is how we turn injustice into opportunity. Online audiences did more than watch. They engaged. The hashtag #RespectForAll, printed on the badges of every bank employee, had grown into a movement spreading across other sectors, from education to healthcare. In her office on the 47th floor after the ceremony, Siena Park stood silently at the window, gazing out at the city. The streets still bustled, the traffic still flowed as always. But she knew, beneath that current, a new standard had been set. Not just for her bank, but for the entire financial industry. Harold Whitman stepped in, his silver hair glinting in the sunset. He smiled, handing Siena a cup of coffee. "You've done something I haven't seen in 4 decades. You've turned fairness into a competitive advantage." Siena nodded softly, her eyes steady. "I didn't do this to win the game. I did it to change the rules. And a year later, no one could deny it. The rules had truly changed." 18 months after that fateful day, the international financial world had begun to speak of the Siena Protocol as a new standard. Not only in the United States, but at global banking conferences from London to Singapore, people were discussing how a crisis that seemed small at one branch had shaken an entire industry. In the bright lights of the International Finance Conference in Zurich, Dr. Siena Park took the stage. An ivory suit, a straight stance, eyes focused. The hall of more than 2,000 representatives from banks, investment funds, and international regulators fell silent, waiting. Behind her, on the massive LED screen, the words appeared, "Dignity is not optional. Pham gia kong phai ju je tuong luong." She began in a calm, steady voice. "A year ago, I was dismissed by an employee of my own bank simply because I did not look like someone who belonged there. But instead of burying the incident, we turned it into a turning point. And from that turning point, we learned one truth. Fairness is not only a moral value, it is a business value." The hall grew quieter. On the side screens, a short video replayed the moment Ethan Blake shouted in her face, then the image of Sienna calmly making the Code 7 call. Some in the audience frowned, others nodded, all saw the stark contrast between arrogance and composed pride. Sienna continued, "We implemented the Sienna Protocol. We invested $4.7 million. In return, we not only prevented crisis, but gained an additional $62 million in annual revenue. But the numbers are not what make me proud. What makes me proud is that thousands of customers now walk into our bank and are welcomed as people nothing more, nothing less." Applause spread slowly through the hall. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the fire in her eyes. When her speech ended, the conference chairman rose and declared, "Metropolitan Trust Bank has become the model for anti-bias reform in global financial services, and that legacy bears the name Dr. Sienna Park." In New York, at the same moment, an MBA class at Columbia was analyzing case study, Metropolitan Trust. On the slide appeared the question, "How would you have handled it if you were Sienna Park that day?" The room buzzed with debate. A black female student raised her hand, her voice emotional. I cried when I watched the live stream. But I also learned that one person can rewrite the rules of an entire system. On the once struggling streets of Brooklyn, small businesses funded by Metropolitan's Minority Support Fund were flourishing. Cafes, craft shops, tech startups. A sign on one window read, "Proudly supported by the Sienna Fund." New jobs, new dreams, all born from the moment a woman was dismissed in her own bank and turned humiliation into drive. Late at night, back in her office on the 47th floor, Sienna stood alone before the vast glass window. The city below glowed bright, traffic streams endless. In that rare quiet, she remembered the first moment Ethan Blake said, "People like you need to understand your place." She smiled faintly. Place position. He was wrong. Her place was not outside the door, not in the shadow of disdain. Her place was here, at the very center of the financial world, reshaping its future. Outside, the wind swept past the skyscrapers. Inside, a whisper rose in her mind. Dignity is never a privilege. It is an inviolable right. And sometimes, when one person stands, the whole world must change. The city lights reflected against the glass, her face merging with the brilliance of the skyline. A story that began in contempt had closed as a legacy named fairness. The story of Dr. Sienna Park has come to an end, but its echoes do not stop within the marble walls of Metropolitan Trust. From a moment of humiliation, she wrote an entire chapter of history for the financial industry. With calm intelligence and unwavering resolve, Sienna proved that fairness is not a slogan hung on the wall, but a system that must be built, sustained, and defended. The lesson is not only for banks, it is for all of us, for wherever prejudice exists, wherever contempt lingers, wherever human worth is denied, there also lies the chance to turn injustice into change. Sometimes you do not need to shout. You only need to stand firm, ask the right question, and transform pain into action. If this story has touched you, press like to spread its message and subscribe so you do not miss the journeys ahead, where fairness is not just spoken of, but practiced. And finally, leave a comment with 2 words, human dignity, to affirm that you too stand for values that cannot be lost. Because sometimes, changing the whole world begins with the very moment someone underestimated you the most.